don't just hope you're growing value till the end. Yeah, hope is not a strategy. First of all, it was about emulating what good other people are doing. Well, ESOPs and private equity firms and public companies measure the value of the company every month. Why can't we? Well, it's because they're playing the ownership game and the investor game. What helped me, Shannon, was understanding the nuances of the jargon that everybody uses. And I did like 8 podcasts in the last couple months all about the jargon. And like at the end of the day, it's about cash.
Welcome to Tip Top Grow Up Your Business with Metronomics. Join me, Shannon Susko, and Metronomics certified coach Jed Roberts.
We'll be talking to business thought leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business team coaches who have all taken the journey to grow up their businesses to their tip top.
We'll be sharing strategies, systems, stories, and how you can grow your company up at the speed you want.
If you're searching for your path to the tip top and feel your time is running out, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tip Top podcast. I'm super excited to be here with Ryan Tansom. Ryan and I are absolutely aligned on many, many things. That's why I'm excited to have Ryan here. I want to hear Ryan's story. So, Ryan, you're going to give us a bit of a war story in the beginning. Then we're going to talk about just your view and why you do what you do today. You know, it's very similar to why I do what I do, but it's really all about, you know, you're committed to this. You want to see the best for the owners of business, leaders of business. So let's kick right off. So we both see a lot of owners of businesses get to a certain point in building their business and then looking around going, I wonder, you know, what we should do next. Looking for that clarity is really, really important. And I know you have spent a lot of time thinking about exits and making sure they're great for owners, for leaders. Give me a little background of how you got to see this blind spot. What's your story? How'd you get here?
Love it. And we were talking about what does how to identify that clarity, and even the word exits, I have a big problem with. So we'll talk about that because it's not even about the exit, and I think it's a false choice, and we can talk
Yeah,
about that. And
yeah,
as
let's.
you've heard me say, Shannon, I will never tell anybody what to do. So I'm not going to sit here and preach what you need to do. It's more of just like,
Yeah.
here's the journey that I've gone through and the glass I've eaten, and hopefully you can spare yourself some pain. Um,
We'll share some glass.
so the story starts with my family business. My dad, we live here in Minnesota. My dad mortgaged our house and bought a bunch of copiers back in the early '90s, and didn't want to work because he wanted independence. He was unemployable pretty much, barely graduated high school, and the reality was, he scaled that company, Shannon, from 0 to 21 million, 115 employees, selling copiers and doing the service behind them.
Yeah.
I worked in and out of the business my whole life. So cold calling copiers, doing you name the job in the family business. I call family business the gravitational vortex because I swore in my grave I'd never go work for him. However, in 2009, when I graduated college, the world was a dumpster fire. I got tricked into joining the business by our CEO at that point. He said, "You're going to sell solutions." Total BS, by the way. It was just copiers called managed print services. But I'm forever grateful for my dad because he brought me into all the bank and the CPA meetings from day one. So at the age of 22, I'm sitting in the bank and the CPA meeting, December of '09. We lost 21 on 21 million in revenue. We lost 940,000 bucks. Um, Mind you, we were Inc. 500, fastest 50, all that,
Yeah.
all those beautiful awards that you can't pay payroll with, by the way. And so that really just changed the game for me, Shannon. It was like, okay, fix this company, hit the $240,000 payroll every other week, make sure you're collecting receivables, you got payables, you got inventory, and just keep doing stuff. So over the next 6 years, I ended up firing 50 people by the time I was 25. We sold 2
Yeah.
branches for cash. I built out the managed IT service offering, the software automation, and then we rebranded to it so we could be a solutions, in big quotes, provider, and all just living paycheck to paycheck, or payroll to payroll, I should say. And all this being said, it got to the point where like I was having a blast, Shannon. Like we turned that business around, new ERP system, a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that you talk about in Metronomics. When you have to do something, you will do it. Like,
Right.
and a
Right.
lot of the entrepreneurs and business owners listening in, but where I got to this point was my father and I were having these conversations of what do we do next? And we were super stuck. We're getting flooded with advice from Vistage, from all of our consultants, and like we just didn't know how to align him and what he wanted, me and what I wanted, and how the business fit into that.
Yeah.
And I can articulate it now, but we were fighting over cash flow, reinvestment versus distributions. What the hell is this company worth?
Yes.
We just knew top line revenue and net income, and what was in our checking account. And so that feeling of being stuck for like 18 months rolled us into the exit of our business to a third party. We picked the highest purchase price. So at, in my mid to late 20s, I helped pin up three local competitors. We kind of ran a mini auction, and
Yes.
I pretended to be the naive kid, yet I was the one running the business. And we picked the person that gave us the highest check. And what happened was we went back to the office in July of 2014, called everybody in, and out of 90 employees, we told everybody. I just hated that more than I can describe. And we paid 52% in taxes, 60 people got let go, and they gutted everything that I had worked on for 6 years. I went home and I cried, and I looked at my dad. I said, "What the F was that?" And so that set off my 10-year therapy session, which started with a podcast. I've had three companies along the
Yeah.
way. And we can dive into a lot of this stuff, Shannon. I tell the main story why, because the last 10 years of all the lessons learned is it came into this owner's framework, the owner's framework, and
Yes.
which is hovers right in parallel with something like Metronomics, which is what the hell does the owner, who's a person, want
Yeah.
out of their time, their
Yeah.
cash flow, and their equity. And those are the constraints, like theory of constraints, where like I believe that independence is allowing us to have escape velocity from our company's operations. So we can, whether we step back from the day to day and sit in the boardroom, whether we sell some of it, all of it, of the equity, we can still have our life that we designed and we don't blow everything up. And so, like, we traded my life that I loved for an 8-figure wire, but I realized that that's not exactly what we needed. So the goal was more nuanced than. That's why I don't even like the word exit. Like, are you talking about your asset, some of your asset, all your assets, some of your distributions, all your distributions, your
Yeah.
job? I mean, like it's a complicated choice, but the clarity that I'm suggesting that I wish I would have had was what do I want with my time?
Right.
What are my
Right.
cash flow goals as an individual? And then what are my wealth goals and how does the equity of the value of the business and the distributions fit into that equation?
Now, like, I love that because so many owners, leaders go for an exit and not sure what that means and not have thought about, the plan, even to that point or after that point. And we know there's been many exits out there that after the fact, leaders are like, oh, I wish I didn't do that.
You're one of
I
the
wish
rare
I
ones. I
didn't
mean,
do that.
I've had 435 podcasts over the last 9 years, and you're like
Yeah.
one of 5 that were like, "I did this on
Yeah.
purpose, and this is exactly what I wanted."
Yes.
And I was like,
Yeah.
like, mind blown.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think what's fascinating is, why does that happen? And what I realized why is because the reason that I'm an entrepreneur is
Yes.
I wanna do whatever I want. I
Yeah.
don't know about you,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I want personal growth. I wanna have meaningful relationships. I wanna have a lasting impact, and I need to have a business or a vehicle to do that. But then, like, I want the flexibility to go in owner optionality is what I call it, whether you
Yes.
have all of it, some of it, of the equity or not. And I say that because what I learned is that the people that pulled that ripcord and regretted it, they didn't think through what this equation was that they were solving for. And it's usually because that stomach ache that you get that you're stuck. Whatever the stuck
Yeah.
means is you're juggling payroll, you're making decisions, you can't see the visibility into the ripple effect. So if I do insert decision, how does that impact my time, my cash flow, my wealth? And do I see that through line? And I think people are willing to do hard work if they actually can see that through line of like how it impacts their
Yeah.
decisions. But
Yeah. And have that plan. So, when we think of freedom of choices, and as an entrepreneur, we get freedom of choices. That's why lots of people want to be entrepreneurs. How do you define that part, like the freedom of choice? And then how early should a business owner start designing for it?
um well, I'll answer the last question first, which is I played soccer growing up. And like the fact that we as entrepreneurs are jumping onto the field and having no freaking clue what the rules are is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like,
love that you
so
say that.
like when should you learn how to play
Yeah,
soccer? Before you step on the field and there's a
yeah,
game? And like, and I just got done doing 3 Vistage workshops last week, Shannon. And like out of 50 people, single digit percentile of people that know the 4 KPIs of evaluation of normalized EBITDA, the multiple, net
yeah,
debt, and working capital, and like action. So, like, if you don't know how valuations work, how in God's name are we supposed to make decisions about what creates value?
yeah,
Like, you're
yeah,
just so like we're just effectively most people are just guessing and hoping that they get that independence. So, like, it's also why I hate the words exit because it's like, I mean, I got plenty of clients where they're sitting in the boardroom while they own their equity. So, like, I
right.
mean, they exited their job, but they didn't exit so I say, like, design like, looking at the game and the rules of, like, how do valuations work? What do I want out of my distributions? Versus my equity growth? So, the rules of the game, I think we should learn as soon as we can. And I say that because, like, I'm not delusional where, like, my dad didn't wanna work for his employer, and he quit. Right? Like, you're
Yeah,
not gonna go, "Well, I'm
yeah.
gonna go sit in the corner and ponder," and, you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
Yeah,
go capture the opportunity, but then parallel, don't like, I guess maybe, I had this guy on my podcast, Shannon, where, he's my age, and he got out of the operations, and he owns 7 companies now, and I resonate with him a lot because he's like, "I just don't ever wanna be part of the operations," and it's literally always been his default, and the same thing with me, where, like, I never wanted to be in the operations. I wanted to
yes,
be the person that was making decisions, allocating resources.
right,
So
right.
that maybe like in parallel. So like, yes, at the very beginning. And then the earlier question you had was, I totally forgot because of my rant.
Was all about, thinking about, the when you go into building a business, we think about well, that actually people aren't thinking about freedom of choices. They actually just wanna build a business, but how
For
do we
whatever reason, right?
yes, and but, to a point they are doing it, for freedom of choice. How do we plan for that? Because a lot of people, and you've met them, I've met them, we've been them, is we get into business and we're doing it all. We're
Ugh.
working in the business, not on the business. And people don't even have time to plan for a freedom of choice or
Yep. Yep.
plan for where they, how they want to spend their time. They're too busy working in the business and they get really tired.
Yep.
How
I'm
do
tracking your
how do
question. Yeah.
you when you think about, building a business, people think, "Oh, I'm gonna have this freedom of choice." Uh, how do we set
Yep.
how do you think about setting people up for that?
So I have a tool that people can look at. It's called the roll and goal clarifier, which is like I was just wow listening to this podcast, and I'm gonna integrate their this. You ever heard of OODA loops?
No,
I
no.
know me neither. I was like, God, I love that word OODA loops. It's in the Air Force where you observe, you orient, you decide, and you act, and you want to increase those
Uh,
feedback loops. And it's OODA
got
loops have
it.
come back. I know OODA loops have come back because of AI and how you want to iterate really fast, but you have to iterate in light of your goal. So if we have the wrong goal, we're just like iterating and could be escaping or like running the wrong direction really fast. And so I say this because what are the things that we need to observe and like what are our goals? So like I think about time, cash flow, and wealth, and we could double click on each of these. So
Yeah,
time, I think about what do you want with your role in your operations
yeah,
versus like other things that you want to do that aren't in your operations. And then so like your time, we all have 168 hours. What do you want to do with it? Then your cash flow could be coming from your salary, distributions, or other assets, or even no cash flow because you're looking for the third bucket, which is equity and assets. And so when you said at the beginning of the podcast, like I've thought a lot about this, like those are the constraints, Shannon. Like we all have time,
yes,
cash flow, or equity. So if you told me I want insert whatever desire you have, you're gonna have to give up one of those things. Time, cash for equity. So you can take more cash today, but it's going to impact your equity. You go, well, I don't want that because I want it to be worth this. Okay. Well, you can then increase the timeline, but you're gonna have to raise money and give up some equity. Well, I don't want that. Like so many people are like the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory the gal. It's like I want it now. It's like, well, there is a actual constraint here, and so like you raised money in your first company. Or was it the second company that you bootstrapped or the first? I can't remember which order it was.
No, second as well, both companies we bootstrapped, but the first company we had venture capitalists come in and invest. Second company we customer funded.
And you didn't get to keep all the equity in the first round, right? I mean, it's like,
Right.
but you had a part of this. So like, I think back to your question is identifying that time, cash flow, and wealth are the constraints, but true independence in my mind is where no matter what you do with your time, you have cash flow that's sustainable, that's not tied to your labor. So that's the escape velocity where like, if you want 250 grand a year, it's coming from investments, not your job.
Yeah.
And then your equity of your business and other assets equal your cash flow that's not tied to your time. That's true escape velocity, and your company can be the vehicle to get you there. So the question back to your original point or question was, how do we think about the goals when we start? And I'll give my own example. Again, I had two
Yeah,
companies.
love that.
The first family business, there was an infrastructure there, right? So like turning, and I've thought a lot about this. I think turning around a business that's losing money is easier than bootstrapping a startup. like, like there's
Well,
stuff to move around,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
like the
Rather
time,
than
cash flow,
making
and
it up.
wealth. Yeah, like in the time, cash flow, and wealth was an impact for me, or was a determining game for me, but my father. So there was two people that had to align our desires for time, distributions, and wealth. And we didn't have that, but we were fixing things. But then when I look at my out of my three businesses over the last decade, one was more successful than the other two. The first two were just kind of consulting firms, and like I was doing consulting. And then the third one was a fractional CFO business. And it got some serious legs underneath it after COVID, given how much people needed financial help. But it was growing, Shannon. And next thing I know, I've got 7 figures of payroll and I got two partners. I'm making shit money and I'm having to grind away. I mean, we were becoming successful. I'm like, okay, well, what's the dynamic here? Do I raise more money? Well, then that dilutes my equity because I was living and breathing this. I'm going, okay, in 2030, here's how much the company would be worth at this and that's normalized EBITDA, this multiple, my ownership percentage. And I'm like, that's not really enough to make this next 5 years worth it. And I'm like, if I accelerate that, I have to raise money, then I dilute my equity. But then, like, along the way, if I bootstrap it, I have to, like, have less cash flow for myself. Everybody else is making 200 plus in my payroll. I'm sitting there going, "What about me?" And so, like, the whole time, cash flow, and equity, I'm like, "Well, and I don't even want the job that it
Yeah.
takes to get there." And I didn't have the luxury of sitting in the boardroom because of the bootstrap. So, like, I mean, it was just like I really saw the constraints firsthand. And so I went to my partners and said, "No, thanks."
Yeah.
And I was just like, because I looked at what's going to take for the next 5 years of my time. Do I enjoy that or not? What's available for cash flow between salary and distributions? And there was no distributions because it was going to be tied to equity growth. And then I was like, that's not enough wealth in 5 years to make this journey worth it.
Right.
Was that
And
helpful?
so, yeah, super helpful. And one of the things, that jumps out, even just in this conversation, in our last conversation, is thinking about when someone gets into business, they're doing it for a purpose, right? And what if there's little financial literacy of the owner of the business? What do you believe every founder needs to do? Like, what should they be doing? And so, our listeners who are listening in, like, what are some steps they should do so they can think like an investor in their own business? Because you know, a lot of people don't get into business thinking this way. They get in because they're like, "Oh, I love this gadget," or "I'm gonna solve this problem," or "I wanna serve this area," whatever it is. But
Or I don't
they're
want a
not
job, or I don't want a boss,
yeah,
right?
I want freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. a hundred
But what
percent.
do you recommend? How do we ensure that every founder, in your experience, thinks like an investor in their own business?
It starts with everything we've talked about so far, which is the rules of the game of like, what do you want of the time, cash, and wealth? So if we hit the I believe button and they've really clarified that, then the next
Yes.
step I would suggest, and there are 3 phases to my Independence by Design owners framework. The first one is plan for the
Yes.
future. So we're going from gut based decisions to planning for the future. And then the second phase is we're going from unsustainable, unpredictable cash flow to building a valuable business. And then the third phase is going from stuck in operations to elevate from operator to owner. So it's like this escape velocity path. And so the second phase, Shannon, one of the components is optimizing your financials. And that's why when you and I were on my podcast, I
Yeah.
was like, I just love the three Hague way. I love Metronomics because it incorporates strategic planning and finance. But like the way that I think about our systems combining is the owner has to do this work. And then that clarity then goes from the boardroom into operations. So the financials become that sheet of music that everybody's reading off of, or the map that everybody's looking at, where operations and ownership, which by the way, if you're both, it's fine, but you just have to have an understanding of what hat you're wearing. And so the
Right.
financials, so that here's where to your question, I got a D in accounting in college. Like I didn't know I like the debits and credits blue book that I had to go, and the guy
Yeah.
was crazy. He
Yeah.
had chalk all over his face. I'm like, I'd rather be at the bar. What's going on here? But when I was running a $20 million business and I wanted to predict what cash was in my checking account, all of a sudden I cared. It's
I
like,
was like, whoa,
hey,
I wish I
like,
had.
yeah, like this matters a lot.
Yes.
Oh yeah, totally. So maybe here's a couple misnomers. And give some people some hope around financials. I hated them too. All the people around me were, degreed people that had all these certifications that made me feel stupid. The CPAs, the bankers, I mean, everybody also needed us. And like, so there's all this dynamic and all this head trash. And so what I learned the hard way is the income statement has nothing to do with cash. Like you still need to pay payroll, you collect your
Yeah.
receivables, you have
Yeah.
debt payments, whatever it is. And so I think that understanding for me, Shannon, how the three financial statements interconnected to result in cash was like seeing the matrix. And
Yeah.
so I like knowing that, like when I went through and did a budget for all my revenue lines, all my cost of goods and all my overhead, which everybody listening in here is capable of doing. You just do the
Yes.
hard work, you promote it all the time, but the income statement is for operations and then the cash flow statement is for ownership. And so understanding that correlation, so that way for me as an owner, if I want X amount of distributions in the middle of 2026 and I have X debt payments and I want to reinvest Y and my working capital is Z, what's the trade-offs of all that stuff? Because I'm convinced everybody listening in here, they know exactly what questions to ask, but the financials become the map to answer whether what your ideas
Yes.
are
Yes.
viable or not. Because if the answer is you don't have any money, I'm assuming they would do something different about it. They just need that
Yeah.
information, need to trust
Yeah.
it.
Yes, for sure. And then, like, if we take it from financial literacy and understanding those pieces, and I loved, your framework and how we think about it, is like even you've talked to CEOs, I've talked to CEOs who are looking for an exit. They might have even got a valuation number, and it's this mysterious number. Meaning it could be a good number, a bad number. A lot of times people don't know how it got made up. And we
Yeah,
know
the valuation
valuations
gods.
are very subjective, right? So, this valuation number shows up, close to the finish line. How should leaders actually think about the valuation along the growth journey? Because it's not about just at the finish line. How do you think about it? How do you coach people to think about
Um, yeah, don't just hope you're growing value till the end. That's what
it?
most people are doing.
No hope.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy. Yeah. Like, let's engineer it. I mean, like,
Yeah,
let's
good.
and, okay, so here's what's helped me answer that question, and first of all, it was about emulating what good other people are doing. Well, ESOPs and private equity firms and public companies measure the value of the company every month.
Right,
Why can't
right.
we? Well, it's
Yes,
because they're playing the ownership game and the investor game, and we're just driving top line revenue usually and net income.
yes.
So what helped me, Shannon, was understanding the nuances of the jargon that everybody uses. And I did like 8 podcasts in the last couple months all about the jargon. And like at the end of the day, it's about cash. So spoiler
No, I
alert.
love that. Yeah, yeah. I love the word
Spoiler alert.
cash. It's about cash. not the jargon. So
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. It's like internal rate of return, discounted cash flow to shareholders, to to the firm, to multiples, even all this stuff matters when we're having conversations with the marketplace. But as an owner, you either have cash or you don't. So
Yes.
how do we balance those two? And so for me, what helped as I broke down the jargon is frameworks to think about, mental models. So the way I think about it, Shannon, is there is the strategic marketplace valuation, which is the eyes of the buyer is going to tell you what your company's worth. And that's what everybody just they stop there. They say, okay, well, like, and I'll just give you two examples that are like very opposite. Family businesses. I mean, there's so many people I've worked with. Like, they value the company and then they discount the company for lack of liquidity and lack of control, and then they gift the shares to the kids because they don't need the money. So
Yeah.
the purpose of
Yeah.
the deal was to discount the firm, share the value over time with the kids. When my father and I sold, we had three offers. One was twice the value of the other two because we gutted the company and they wanted our contracts and our people. So,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
but it starts in logic, which is the value of a company is based on the sustainable future cash flows. So someone somewhere in the supply chain has to make money unless you're Jay
Yes.
Powell and you can hit control P and print as much as you want. Like, someone has to make money. And so we are either fitting in that game ourselves or we're going to be playing someone else's game of cash flow. And so where we are in that hierarchy is really important. So then the second thing, that is the second concept that has helped me, is like, what do we do about it while we run the company if we don't have a buyer at the table? Let's build a company that has sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow. So therefore, we're increasing the multiple, because the multiple is just a proxy for how many years of cash flow some buyer is willing to give you based on the risk. So the way I think about it, Shane, is like, when someone's sitting in, they're doing their three Hague planning, it's like all of the investments that you're making should have a through line to how it's going to create more sustainable cash flow. Otherwise, why the hell are you doing it?
Yeah. I mean, we always start with cash, right? Forecasting cash first. But you know what's funny? And anyone knowing me and listening in a little bit on this is that uh like part of the three hag, there's two parts to it. One is that planning for cash and forecasting cash first and knowing where the cash is going to be, you know, 36 months, and having that confidence. The other side of it, and a little bit of what I'm known for, is that strategic sale where it sort of blows up any of the financial literacy, any of all of that, right? And you're getting a valuation. That's where the number shows up. You have a pretty good idea. You know, you've gone to seek out that strategic buyer because you know it'll cost them more to build it. It'll take too long, and they're willing to pay more than what your financials are worth. But I don't want to take away the only reason I'm saying that is lots of people know that the strategic sale was what I was always going for and what myself and my team went for. But we had, I want a big but to everybody. Our financials were dialed, like dialed. We knew them inside out. We knew that we needed to not only know what we're doing right here, right now, but we needed to actually go forward. And our buyers actually looked at our 3-year financials because we had mapped them out for 36 months. They looked at, cash, everything you talked about, but they also then evaluated what it would take them to build what we had in order to get it, today. They wanted it today, not in the future. So they actually valued our organization on our 3-year plan. So I like from that perspective, everyone's still like everything you've talked about planning forward, about, knowing your be financial literate and knowing where you want to end up. Like those all, I mean, they mash so well with the 3-year highly achievable goal. And it can give you a multiple on it because we've not only predicted the future, the thing that really got us a multiple was actually showing month over month, quarter over quarter, how well we could predict the future and predict our cash flows.
Yeah, you need to like put a little bookmarker on that for your editing team because amen, Shannon. And um, over the years, like there's a stat that rings true to me, and I see it over and over again, is that like 90+% of people that sell their business get paid for the past, not the future, because they have
Yes.
not had any ability to demonstrate their ability to predict the future.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that, I mean, because technically, with like very nuanced, technically the discounted cash flow is you're discounting future cash flows. But if you don't
Yes.
have any ability to prove the discounted cash flow, then you're looking
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
past. And
Yeah.
especially if you're
Yeah.
a high growth company, you're getting totally
Yeah.
screwed. But then
Yeah.
here's a couple of the things that I love about the button,
Yes.
what you said is, and this is it rings true to my owner optionality that I want for me and for anybody is okay, so if I'm managing I'm gonna think out loud here, so bear with me
Yeah. Yeah.
and put me in the guardrails. It's like so the if I as the owner have determined like I'm just gonna make some numbers up, I want to make 25K a month in free cash flow distributions after working capital debt taxes while the operations is going. So I can make call it 300 grand. Great. Well, if you like, if you turned around and actually just turn that into debt, you could have a seller financing, you do an ESOP. I mean, you could do all these things because you could take your cash flow and the distributions that you're taking that are safe distributions and turn that into a financial sale of an ESOP, family office, private equity firm. You could defend the value of your company because you've proven that you can predict the future and create sustainable distributions. To your point, and so, like, I think what's unbelievably important, going back to clarifying your goals, I personally didn't like, we did what you said, which is I pinned
Yeah.
up three local competitors. We picked the highest purchase price. I had to fire my college buddies and destroy what I had built
Yes.
because they wanted 3,200 contracts. And it
Yes.
was not what I wanted. Like, and
Yeah.
my dad actually did not need the liquidity in one lump sum. So had we done
Right.
what we're talking about,
Yeah.
my dad
Yeah.
wanted like 40 to 50 grand a month in distributions in the shareholder board room while making sure that I didn't overinvest to sacrifice those distributions. That's all he wanted. And
Yes.
I could have $100 million company right now had we done all this stuff with also options to then do an ESOP private equity. So I think going back to your point is your like when you were on my show, it was like your goals from day one were clear. Cause like if you're gonna
Yes.
sell to a third
Yes.
party,
Yeah.
engineer what they want to your point where like
Yeah.
they can't build it. And I actually noticed and have had plenty of people on my show where like here's my definition of optionality is you have a cash flowing business that equals the valuation that you need or want, whether you sell your company to any financial buyer and get all the like you nail your cash at closing that you need to be free, whether it's 40% of it or 100% of it, like
Yeah.
you've nailed it at
Yep.
closing. You can do whatever you want, but if you wanted to go to a third party like you have, you can dictate all of the terms and conditions because you're even you might not have another buyer at the table, but you know what your next 3 years is going to look like for distributions
Yeah.
and value growth.
Yeah.
So you have this ability to be flexible, but play the game if you want.
And I think it's really important because and you said like of all the people, there's like five of us who showed up on your podcast. I said, yes, we were looking. So, but we had already decided what we wanted to leave with, what we like before we started. We actually, ridiculously enough, wrote it down and put it under our monitor, right? Two partners in my second business. And when we, got the term sheets, we pulled out our pieces of paper and go, does that match? And then, off we went. We wanted to make sure it lived on. Whatever we built lived on in the new organization. We wanted to make sure our team lived on, all those good things.
Here's my favorite question for people is if I handed you a bag of $100 million and I fired everybody, threw your logo in the trash and shut down your website, how would you feel?
Oh, yeah, no, that's not why we did it. Right? We did it to make a difference. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why I wanted to capture what you said because so often we talk about the number, but it's like, okay, well, the difference between an ESOP and a private equity sale, and there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of PE firms. Every one of them or every buyer will do something different with your organization. So it's the numbers and then the value and the cultural alignment, all the stuff that you talked about. And I think it's matching up all of that stuff. Because back to when you were on my show and I heard your story, it's like all I want for everybody listening in is, I did this for these reasons. This is what I got. I tried these things. This didn't work. This worked. And this is why I did it. And here's how it worked. It's just like, great. It's a thoughtful statement. And you looked at all the options. You made some decisions. You knew there was trade-offs. You knew there was a calculated bet. It wasn't 100% probability, but you did your best.
Yeah. I have 3 more questions if you'll answer them. The first one is,
keep these short. No, I'm good. I got time.
What's one myth about selling your business that drives you nuts? And what's the truth behind it?
Selling what? Your job or your asset? That right there.
Okay,
I can't even I won't even answer the question of when do you want out? Not answering the question, because you could get out of your job, sit in the boardroom and keep all of the distributions and equity, or you could sell your equity to an ESOP or someone else and still have a job. So I think it's a false choice.
Okay, next question. You've worked with a lot of owners post-sale. What emotional or identity shift do you see them face that no one really prepares them for?
I think identity is something that I've thought a lot about, and I think God was in my late 20s when I had to go through this. And when we ask each other, who is Shannon and who is Ryan? And it's well, to say insert industry, revenue size, employee count is so dysfunctional that we're just overcompensating for childhood issues of our own insecurity or whatever it is. And for now, it's I would answer, I'm a father, I've got kids. Here's what I'm passionate about. Here's what I'm curious about. Here are the big topics that I like to make impacts of. Here's the meaningful relationships I have. And here's how I'm planning on personally growing. And here's then how the business fits with inside of my identity. And so that whole, I think, just identity as an issue in itself becomes the big issue. And that's where Bo Burlingham's book, Finish Big. I mean, we sold him. They're like, what do you do? Well, I used to insert whatever the hell I used to sell copiers. And it's that's such a ridiculous, sad, empty thought process where I think it's the same issue, Shannon, why people won't step back is because they're actually scientifically addicted to the dopamine of the chaos. Where Rob Dubay is a dear friend of mine. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Image One. He's got a book called Do Nothing. He's partners with Gino Wickman at the 10 Disciplines. He was just on my podcast and he's totally stepped back, but it's Rob's all about ego dissolution. And so whether you sell your company or not, I think it's this whole identity thing is thinking about who you really are is actually a very, do it while you've got your company instead of while you've got nothing. Cause you can't, there's no take backs usually.
I think, and I do think that's why a lot of people were surprised when we designed for an exit, right? We designed our organization for an exit. It had to live on without me. And this is a long time ago. People are like, what? What are you doing? I was like, you're going to sell your baby? I'm like, yes, I'm building my baby to be sold. Okay, here's the last question. Well, actually, I have one more after that. But if you could go back and whisper one piece of really good advice to your younger self before, right before your own exit, what would it be?
The journey you're about to go on is worth it.
Oh, that's so good. A lot of people don't even know they're on that journey yet.
I didn't either. I didn't either. That's why it's hey, it's gonna be freaking rough, but it's worth it.
Okay. You have an amazing podcast. You're doing amazing work. Can you give our listeners a little bit more clarity on where they can find out more about you and what you do?
RyanTansom.com is the website. I've got the Independence by Design framework on there. I got a bunch of videos and the podcast. If it was one thing that I would do, that if this conversation fascinated you, is I've got the role and goal clarifier. It's a free video and exercise. So it's not only so I'm drawing it out and teaching this idea, and then there's a PDF they can download. And I've got a Google sheet that they can go and work on it themselves. So that'd be what I do, and it's an ownership coaching framework, Shannon. So a lot of my clients are running things like Metronomics. They're in a bunch of CEO peer groups, and they're looking to level up on the boardroom kind of thinking.
And I love it. Independence by design. Role. Did you say role? And what did you just say? Role and
Role
goals?
and goal clarifier.
Okay. All right. So they can go check it out at ryantansom.com. Thank you for being here. I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I don't want to take too much more time out of your day. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for
Thanks,
being
Shannon.
here.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Tip Top is brought to you by Metronomics.
To find out more about Metronomics and how this proven 20-year-old system will save you time and money as you grow up your business,
visit metronomics.com. That is metronomics.com.
share your thoughts on today's episode in the comments and suggest topics you'd love us to explore the next time.
Also search for Metronomics in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else that great podcasts are found.